Thanks again for tuning back into the channel. In this week's video, we're going to be looking at basic compositing techniques, and what I will say is there is tons of ways to do this. This is just one of the ways that I put this image together. The last few times that I've done it differently each time. So it's basically just there to show you how you can achieve things very quickly and very simply. The 3 images used are available to download below in the description, so please feel free to follow along. These techniques that I'm using just add to the different techniques that you can employ to create your composites. And I would say that this video is good for beginners, but as long as you have dabbled in Photoshop a little bit. So without further ado, let's dive right into creating Winter Storm. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to File, New Document and set up a brand new A3 document, 8-bit, in the horizontal orientation. From here, drag in and drop one of your assets, and it's this one here, which is the background. The next step is to turn off the background white layer so that the AI is not included in this, and then select areas of your image, including the transparent background, and then click Generate. From each of these, you will get 3 generations. Choose the one or continue more generations until you're happy. Repeat the same process on the other side as well. Clean up any areas that you're not happy with. From here, we're going to group all the layers, and that's simply by holding down Shift, selecting the top and the bottom one, and then going down to the folder icon. Rename your folder. It's at this point you want to go in and clean up any areas that you're not happy with, and you can do this with a multitude of tools, the remove tool or whatever you want to use. Once you're happy, lock the layer group. As we're building the image up individually, the next thing to do is drag in the plane rec. From here, go into select subject, and that will create a marquee around the actual plane rec itself, but we want to add in more. So to do this, you simply, in this case, go to the lasso tool, and to add to your selection, hold down Shift and draw in, and that will add to your selection. And you can do this carefully or quite roughly, it's entirely up to you. And if you want to take away any areas, just hold down Alt and draw around the areas that you want to remove. Once you've done this and you are happy with it, click the mask button. Photoshop is getting better at masks and selections, but what we need to do is we need to go in and clean up some of the areas. So this is another technique you can employ to clean up areas. With the mask selected, go into the brush and then go into the brush settings. It's here in the brush settings that you want to take a soft edge brush, but yet turn the hardness up to around about 80%. To increase or decrease your brush sizes, just use the square brackets. Now, if you click anywhere on the screen just once and then hold down Shift and click at another point, it will draw a straight line for you. And that's another method of quickly cleaning up edges to save, because some people don't like using the pen tool. And you just draw around the edge and then go in and take out all the other areas. Now you can increase the brush size to take out the rest of the areas and decrease the brush to work in close to your edges. It's just a matter of looking around the entire document and removing the areas that you don't want to be a part of the plane rec. And thanks to the mask, if you make a mistake, you can always go back and add these back in. The next part of the process is to move and place the plane rec wherever you want it in your scene. Now I use Command and T, which is free transform, and it allows me to do several different things once I have enabled it. Once you're happy with the placement of the plane wreck, it's time to think about placing it behind the snow-covered mountains there. And to do this, I simply press Command and J to copy the layer up, and then select the actual mask of the layer, right-click, and apply a layer mask. Now you'll notice a couple of times that it didn't work, and that's simply because I never clicked on the grey. Once I've got that, there is no mask around anymore, so we have to create another mask at another point. But what I'm doing just now is I'm going to show you how to modify the edges. And to do this, you're going to select Modify, and in this case choose Contract, and then invert and press the delete button. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in closer now just to show you that actually working. So if you go up to select, make sure you're on that layer and go up to select, and then go modify, contract, and in this case contract by 1. Then go back up to select and choose invert, and then hit the backspace key. You'll see that most of those edges have disappeared. So that's another way of removing that. What we want to do now is create a mask for this so that we can go in and place the plane wreck behind these rocks. Now you'll notice here that it doesn't work, and that's simply because we don't have a layer for it to work on. It's trying to draw through a group. So what you do is you select the top layer of the group and then press Shift, Alt, Command and E, and that will create a layer out of the group contents. Now we can use the selection tool to draw around certain areas, in this case the rocks. Again, with this, if you hold down Shift, it will add to your selection, and if you make a mistake like there, hold down Alt and it will subtract from your selection. Once you're happy, you can take this and check just to see exactly where it is, and it's going to affect your image by turning on and off, in this case, the plane wreck layer. I'm just going to add a few more to this, and it's just simply holding down Shift, and that's adding to this. Once I'm happy, I'm going to turn on the plane wreck layer and then press the mask button. Now you'll notice that it's created an inverted mask. So I have to press Control and I or Command and I to invert that mask so that the plane is where I want it. At this point I'm going to save it because I should have saved it earlier. The next step in the process is to bring in the third and final image of the subject. And if you go into Select Subject, it will roughly select the person standing here, and we're going to add to that. So we're going to do that again via the lasso tool and hold down Shift to add to the selection and hold down Alt to subtract from the selection. Once we've done this, of course, we will be creating a mask on it, but this is just one of the quick ways of bringing in different objects, or in this case subjects, to any of your images. Now that we've created the mask, it's time to go in, and if we see any areas, it's time to refine it. And to refine it, we use the brush tool and a soft edge brush. Ensure that you are working on the mask. As you saw, a little mistake was happening there. Once you're happy with the mask you've created, it's time to press Control or Command and T, which is Free Transform. Now this allows you to scale it down, to rotate it, quite a few different options. For this image, I've scaled it down to roughly where I think it would match the aeroplane itself, and just placed it on top of the hill. Command and J to copy up this layer, and then we are going to rasterize the layer and apply the layer mask. Now the reason we are doing this is we're going to copy that layer again. We're going to turn off the initial layer that we created a mask on, but then we're going to copy up that layer again. And with the copied layer, we are going to make that the basis of the shadow that we're about to create. So just copy that layer up once and rename it Shadow. Command and J will copy the layer. Then go into Edit, Transform and Flip Vertical. And then we can just move that into place. Currently, I have View and Snap turned on, so I need to turn that off because we need to be able to work with this quite freely. So now that I've turned Snap off, I can move this wherever I want. The next is to go into Image Exposure and turn down the exposure. As you notice, I also turned down Offset. There was no need for that whatsoever. What we're going to do now is we have to look where the sun is in the sky, or where the light source is in the sky, and also look at the length of the shadows. Now that's only one of the considerations that we have to do, because we also have to look how the lighting is with the shadows. Are the shadows harsh, strong shadows, or are they quite soft? And in this case, because it's a snow and the volumetric light, they're going to be quite soft. So to get the shadows where we want them, we first have to look at the landscape and imagine how the landscape is, and it's curving over a hill and then into a slight dip and then curving back up. So to achieve this, I've used the warp tool. Now this can be slightly fidgety at first, or you might get it the first time that you are trying it. So you'll notice here, just to get it right as best I could, I went in quite a few times just to do this. I've also turned down the layer opacity slightly, and that's simply because I want it to match as best I can the other shadows that are here. The next thing is I created a mask on this, and I'm now using a gradient to blend away some of the shadow itself, just to make it look more natural. I have a linear gradient on it first, but after a couple of attempts at this, the radial gradient gave me a better result. So remember, you can always jump between gradients if you're using these within your masks, just to get the result that you are seeking with this. It's worth trying this a few different times just to see the warp tool and how it would go over the landscape. Is it a long shadow? Is there a lot of volumetric light? How is the shadow playing around with the rest of the image? Is the contrast too much? So all these things come into play when you are creating composited images like this. The next thing is to go in and clean up around the feet. Now, there's many different ways you can do this. For me, I've simply used a soft edge brush and painted away as if the feet are actually sinking into the snow. Prior to that, though, I'm just moving the shadow around, and I'm going to use the eraser just to get rid of any small remnants that I don't want in the shadow layer itself. Then, with the mask layer selected, I'll just go in and paint away some of these. Now, you'll notice that when I first paint in here, I forgot to adjust my brush, and that's fair enough. You'll notice it's quite a hard edge when we do this. And it looks okay, but it's not the greatest. So remember to use the best brush that's available just to get the softest of edges. We're zoomed right in here anyway, as you can see, so probably to the naked eye looking at the image, people won't notice, but you will notice when you are creating your image. So try and finish every layer as best you can. Compositionally, the image doesn't look the greatest. It's okay, but it does not look the greatest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer, a new blank layer, and then I'm going to go into my brushes with a black brush enabled. For this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in some bird brushes, which I already have installed. But if you go to brusheasy.com, there is many different choices there for you to download and install onto your computer. Now, to take the brush size up or down, it's on a blank layer just now, so I can paint that at any size at the moment and then use Command and T and take it down in size. But one of the things you have to think about when you are doing this is we're trying to make the image look as believable as possible if that can be done. So one of the things that you have to think about is contrast in an image. The further something is away from you, the less contrasty it is. The closer it is to you, the more contrast contrast that we'll have. So to get round this with the bird layer, I simply turned down the opacity of the layer. Now, going back to the figure, as you can see, there is too much contrast compared to the rest of it. So what we're going to do is we are going to adjust the contrast using curves. And I'm simply going to bring it down slightly. It's affecting all the layers, so I'm going to clip it to the layer below, and then I'm going to crush the blacks slightly. And that's simply by dragging the left-hand black slider up slightly so that it is not pure black. After that, we are adding a hue saturation layer. I want to take away some of the saturation from this. And because we clipped the layer previously, this will also clip to the person standing as well. I then want to bring back some of the colour, but just in the legs really. So I'm going to use this first brush in the general brush settings and just paint in some of the colour, and then that should be that done. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm going to show you a few different methods, and in this case what we're going to do is colour the plane rec. Now this is not the method I am finally going to use, but it's just another option for you. If we go into hue saturation and we take the hue saturation layer and we adjust it and click colorize, you see it affects the entire image. So we have to use icon and clip it to the layer below, and now it's just a matter of adjusting the sliders till you get the effect that you want. And for this, as I said, it doesn't work for me with this image, although I can dial in some of the purple tones to it. It still feels as if it's a little bit out of place. This can be used for many different things. I'm just showing you here different ways of colouring or applying colour to elements within an image. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that layer off, and I'm going to show you my preferred method for colouring this rec for this image. I've simply created a new blank layer, and I'm going into the paint bucket tool, and then I'm going to sample a tone or a hue from the image by holding down Alt. And then I'm going to flood fill that entire layer, and then once again clip it to the layer below, and then choose one of the layer blends to match best visually for the best effect for this image. And you can see colour works really well here. Turn it on and off. It could be too much, so you can go in if you want and adjust the opacity ever so slightly. When you adjust the opacity, the underlying colours show through and also help to blend the images better. The sky is still requiring some more atmosphere to it, so I'm going to take the first brush in the general brushes setting, hold down Alt and sample a colour from one of the lightest colours from the sky, and it isn't white in this case, and then Command and T and scale it out, just so that we have, I suppose, what you would call a sun flare. And I'm just going to move that into position, and then once I'm happy, click OK. That is just to add more atmosphere to the image. And I can dial that down slightly using the opacity slider of the layer as well. So we are nearly done with this image, and just a couple of things to look at and to do for the next step. So I'm first of all going to select the top layer and then select the bottom layer, hold down Shift, Control, Alt and E, and that is going to compress all these layers into a brand new layer. And now simply to save space, I've combined all the layers that I don't need into one group. Hold down Shift, select all the layers and press the group icon. Use the guides to create an origin for the next part, and we're going to use the polygonal lasso here, and what we're going to do is just create what we would think would be the light beams coming in. So I'm just going to draw out to there, clip down, draw back up and close that. I'm then going to hold down Shift and click again and create another one. And now these can be slightly random. You don't have to be too accurate with this because of the effect that we're going to do. Once we've closed that, get down to the mask icon and click mask. And you will see light coming in here. It looks terrible. So how do we change that? We select the mask, we go up to filter, blur and Gaussian blur, and then adjust that until you are happy with it. Now you can play around with this as much as you want and really soften it, or you can bring it back so that you have a slight hardness or harshness within the light so that it is completely visible. This is entirely up to you, and this again is also optional, but it's just showing you another technique of how you can apply effects to your images. Okay, it is too harsh and I can see that. So selecting the mask and taking a soft round brush, just press B for brush and ensure that you are painting in white, and you can blend that back in so that you get the effect. Now it's at this point, it's entirely up to you how strong an effect you can have with this. You can turn it down, you can leave it where it is, and by turning it down I mean just adjusting the opacity, but you can see that it's made a massive difference to the image already. For myself, I'm going to bring it back a bit so that it doesn't stand out and it's not the first thing you notice when you're looking at the image. For me, that's the image complete. However, I don't like the aspect ratio of it, and this image itself suits a 16:9 aspect ratio. So it's just a case of then selecting the crop tool and adjusting the image until you are happy with the effect. If there's any parts, do some edge patrol in your image, and if there's any parts, simply go in and remove them. Use the generative fill to remove them, or simply just erase them away. Hopefully you get something from that, and hopefully it just lets you see. I know it was about 20 odd minutes long, but hopefully if you followed along, you picked up some new techniques or just learned different ways in which to do things. Yes, AI was employed in creating the image, and I didn't go in and refine the AI, which I could do, but I've got a video coming up in the near future around AI solely, and how you can use it to create your images and how you can employ it to work better for you. So that's coming up in the near future. Thanks again for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.